So to start off, Peter, just tell us a bit about what Twiga does and the role of funding, as well as why you need 5 billion shillings, because I think I want to be in that business.
I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Mutsi, thank you so much. Peter Njonjo, as introduced, I'm a Kenyan, married with 4 kids, and started Twiga 6 years ago. Then I was working for Coca-Cola, and at times it's easier to define Twiga through the problem that we are trying to solve. Many of you might not be aware of this, but Kenyans, we are spending about 55% of our disposable income on food. That's equivalent to what consumers in the US were spending 150 years ago in the 1870s. And today they're spending only about 10%. And if you look at the reason why we're spending that amount of money on food, is because of the informality and the inefficiency of our retail industry. So if you think about Nairobi, about maybe 6 million people. If you think about the greater Nairobi, maybe from Machakos, Thika, Murang'a, Kiambu, and serviced through 180,000 retailers. So that means that there's a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of informality. So what we do as Twiga is that we're a B2B e-commerce business that's focused on food and grocery. And the whole idea is we aggregate the demand of these informal retailers and start building more efficient supply chains. Through this, we've now started maybe moving farming away from maybe the very informal farming to more commercial farming, which is productive, which is lower cost. So I think the key thing for us is that our intent or our objective is to revolutionize retail. So, and that's essentially what Twiga does, and that then creates opportunities for different players, from manufacturers to commercial farmers, to then have structured access to the domestic market.
Okay, thank you. That's very useful. And what's the role of funding in that whole supply chain for Twiga? Well, because you're talking about big sums of money, so it's just curious to see at what stage does it come, and what does the presence or lack of funding do to your business?
So I think the key thing is that when you look at a company like ours, the problem that we're trying to solve is actually a significant problem. If you think about the way I described it, across sub-Saharan Africa, this is a $300 billion problem waiting to be solved. In Kenya, you would say that this is about a 2.3 trillion shilling opportunity. So, of course, the size of the prize is significant. But what you find is that the challenge that we have in a market like Kenya or in many other markets is that when you're solving a problem like this, you have to create an ecosystem to support your business, because that ecosystem does not exist. I'll give you an example. Today, if you wanted to do a B2B e-commerce business in maybe Europe, you don't need to lease, you just need to lease a warehouse. Everything else is available on a pay-as-you-use basis. If you look at Kenya, really there was no what I'd call a grade A warehouse facility. So just because of it, we've had to invest about 1.2 billion shillings just to set up that infrastructure, which if we were in Europe, we'd really not have set up. Or there was an ecosystem that actually provides that infrastructure on a lease basis. When you think about the early days, for example, as Twiga, no bank was willing to finance us. Many of you may not know the story, but my wife and I, we had to sell our matrimonial home to finance the business in the early days. And that's essentially how we're able to access capital. So as a result of that, for example, maybe a lot of the vehicles that we have, or distribution vehicles that we had to buy them instead of leasing them, because no one was willing to provide us a leasing solution. So Today we have over 130 distribution vehicles, half are owned. We hope at least we can move that out of our balance sheet and move to a leasing solution. Again, that's something that you have to set up because the market is not there for you. So what you find is that, there's just so many of these examples. I mean, for example, when it comes to farming, 70% of our farmers are smallholder farmers, which means that there's a lot of informality, poor record keeping, and very poor yields. So when you're dealing with that ecosystem, how do you move people, again, to have maybe a more structured way of farming? And when I talk about more structured way of farming, many of you are concerned about what you eat, what's the traceability, what type of pesticides have been used. Now, if you're going to have this smallholder farming system that is very, very informal, it will not serve that need. So how do you then help farming in a country transition to something that is more commercial and a little bit more structured? Again, that is creating an ecosystem that does not exist. Because if I were in Europe, I'd tap into large farmers who already exist, or if I'm in Latin America, there's already so many large farmers that exist and you just tap into that ecosystem. But for us to provide safe food, there's a lot more heavy lifting that we need to do in this market. So when you start putting all these things together, you start seeing that, yes, there's an intellectual property that you need to build for your business to thrive, but more so, you then need to have to create this ecosystem, which you don't need to create when you're anywhere else, everywhere, in other markets. And because of that, the amount of money that you need to solve this then becomes much, much more. But what happens also is that when you solve the problem, then you also create a much, much bigger entity, a much, much bigger opportunity.
Thank you. That's quite useful to hear. And then COVID-19, what impact has that had on your business and on your supply chain, on your value chain, from a funding perspective?
So the thing is that we've been very, very fortunate during this period of COVID, because when we started early on, we were very clear on what it is that we needed to focus on. So the first thing is that we knew that there was going to be a significant disruption in disposable incomes in the country. So again, we were very, very focused around what type of solutions are we going to offer our customers. The second thing is that we knew that also a lot of the manufacturers and suppliers were also going to have disruptions in terms of their distribution networks. So again, what we asked ourselves is what type of solutions are we going to provide to our manufacturing partner base? And then of course there's an exceptional service. How do we ensure that even during COVID, we're able to provide an exceptional level of service to our customers out there? So when we look at the business between April and this month just ended in August, at least within those few months, we've managed to double our business in revenue, which I think has been very, very encouraging during this period. And if I look at our business from February of last year, when I took over as CEO, at least we've grown our revenues above sevenfold. 7x during that period. So again, and it's because of the size of the opportunity that we're addressing and the problems that we're trying to resolve in the market. And this has essentially created the momentum that we're seeing in the business. But it's still early days. There's still a lot of work to be done. And hopefully our objective in the next 5 years is to then say that we played a significant role in reducing the amount of money Kenyans are spending on food.
Okay, thank you. That's quite encouraging to know that the businesses that are thriving during this crisis. And I'm seated next to Susie Okabi, and we'll talk a bit later. But I'm sure Susie wants to know, how do you have conversations with people like Goldman Sachs and IFC and persuade them to move money from their accounts to yours? What kind of conversations do you have? What sort of criteria? If you could just talk a bit about that. I'm sure there's lots of SMEs that are doing well, have reached a certain stage, and they want to know the magic that extracts these funds. So Susie is listening very keenly.
So actually, I worked on Goldman Sachs when I was leaving Coca-Cola. So I was in Coca-Cola for 21 years, and my last role, I was president for Western Central Africa. So at the time, I felt that I was faced with a career option, either to move to North America and continue with my career of selling soft drinks, or I come back home and figure out how to scale this business. So, and we had agreed on a transition with my co-founder, Grant Brook. So I went to London, and I think this was more or less like I'd set up a couple of meetings with all these investors, and I remember my conversation with Goldman Sachs was like, you know what, I'm moving away from a lucrative career. I'm moving away from Coca-Cola. I spent 21 years there. I still have prospects of actually becoming fairly senior within the organization. Then I was the youngest business unit president globally for the company. And what I mentioned to them is that, look, you know, if I'm willing to stake my reputation and my career in running this startup that I started 6 years ago, then what reason do you have of not investing in this business? Because, you know, definitely if we execute the plan that I'm putting in front of you, definitely we will get to generate a lot of value for everybody sitting around the table. So, and I think one of the things that we're able to demonstrate very early on for our investors was around the ability to execute. And I think many people focus on developing a good business plan, but the key thing is what's the caliber of talent that you have within the organization that if you then put against the opportunity that you're presenting, gives that confidence that we'll be able to execute. And that's essentially what created that confidence with our investors. It was around the capability, myself with my track record globally, joining the business. Our earlier management team, also very, very capable people. And all these people are people that we managed to attract onto the business because we're able to offer them stock options. They've done very well for themselves, at least in the last couple of years. So, and through that, you know, I had people leave their jobs in other funds to come and join Twiga. I've had people move away from their businesses to come to Twiga and join us. So when you look at our management team, it's as good as any other multinational that you have in Kenya, be it Coca-Cola or any other leading manufacturing entity. So, and I think that for us is what gives a lot of investors confidence.
Okay, thank you very much. Final question to you, Peter, which has to do with your Coca-Cola experience. Coke deals with SMEs across the value chain, from retailers of soda to stockists to distributors, and some bottlers perhaps are not so big. So you've had the experience of seeing SMEs at various stages, seeing them struggling with financing or thriving. And then, of course, plus your West African experience in terms of the differences between here and there. What are some of the things we could learn from West Africa in terms of raising funds? So if you could just capture the Coke and the West African experience in terms of a learning for the people who are in this webinar.
So I would say that for me, what Coke did was give me a front row seat to learn more about the African ecosystem, the SME ecosystem. So through that, I had the opportunity to directly manage about 40 countries for Coca-Cola. One of the things I would say is that, you know, when we look at the ecosystem that we have in Kenya vis-a-vis the ecosystem, let's say in Nigeria, for example, let's just talk about the fundraising ecosystem, because I was also involved quite a bit in the startup ecosystem in Lagos. One of the things that I find is that a lot of Nigerians are connected to incubators in the US, and namely, for example, Y Combinator. So, and what you're finding is that, you know, a lot of people starting young businesses, going to Y Combinator, getting seed capital, and then coming back to Nigeria. And a lot of the actually Nigerian startups are headquartered in Delaware. Maybe many of you might not be aware of that fact. So what happens is that when it comes to due diligence and all that, it's then very, very easy for American investors to invest in those companies because they're then investing in maybe onward opportunities in markets like Nigeria. Now, in Kenya, we also have a thriving ecosystem of funders. But I think one of the things that's missing in this market is early stage funding. A lot of companies do not have the money that they need to get their businesses started. And you may not have access maybe to incubators like Y Combinator. So there's need for us to figure out either through angel networks or ways in which we can actually scale up the early stage funding. And what you will find is that after companies have the early stage funding, it then opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of later stage funding, because as Andia mentioned, once you're looking for $1 million, $2 million, there's a lot of money that exists in that space. What is really not there is if you're looking for 10 million shillings, 15 million shillings, there isn't a lot of players to provide that type of capital. So again, that's one thing that we really need to figure out how to fix in this market, and that could unlock a lot of opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. That was very useful. I'm sure there'll be tons of questions for you. And I think you'll definitely be somebody who wants to talk with a bit more to talk to SMEs.